Hello, my name is Ian Buruma. I teach part-time at Bard College in New York, cinema and other things. I've written a few books. Many of them have to do with memories of World War II, which made me particularly interested in Mr. Lau's excellent documentary. For those with low vision, I will describe myself. I have pale skin, very little hair, um, and sitting in front of a wall with a Japanese theater poster behind me. So over to Lau. I enjoyed your film enormously. I think it's an extraordinary work. And I have various questions, some to do with the actual film and some with the history. One thing that interested me is there were some extraordinary interviews with people in Malaysia, as well as in Taiwan. When you grew up in Malaysia, how much of this stuff about what the Japanese had done, the massacres of Chinese in Malaysia, the Huat Chao, how much of this was discussed when you grew up?
Okay. Thank you for the questions. I'm Lau. I'm the director of the From Island to Island. I'm so happy to be here to share my films today. Actually, my experience of growing up in Malaysia, because for the what the content in the history book is much based on the Malay nationalism narrative. So we don't read much about the Chinese massacre on the history book, but we can hear it from the old people, from the elderlies. They keep telling us like how terrible and traumatized experience when Japan army came and occupied us for 3 years and 8 months. So, but for all the war, we thought we among the Japanese army there are only Japanese, but we never knew there are Taiwanese involved in the army. Only later when I made this film, then I realized there are Taiwanese in the army.
And you also interviewed some non-Chinese in Malaysia. There was somebody with an Indian background and a Malay. To what extent did these tensions that existed during the war, when the Japanese were playing one ethnic group off against another, to what extent do they still persist?
Well, actually, this is what I'm trying to do because in Malaysia, we are made up of like three major races, Malay, Indian, and Chinese. But how we perceive of the World War II history narrative is very different. It's based on your ethnic experience. And when Japan army came, they treat quite nasty, badly to just the Chinese ethnics because all the Chinese is quite support the anti-Japan war in China. So before they came, they already see Chinese as troublemaker. But for Malay, they actually recruit Malay and try to get Malay into their army, like recruiting them as soldiers. But it also do the same apply to Indian. There is a so-called Indian National Army. So they recruit the Indians to join the army so that to join their war through the Burma to free India. And in fact, during the time, there are a lot of Indians joining the war under the calling from the Chandra Bush. But in fact, during when I made this documentary, I do try to approach some still alive INA soldiers, but it becomes a kind of sensitive issue for India nowadays. So they reject my interview because nowadays in India they try to promote Chandra Bose as a national hero again. So they don't want to reveal the history that they are tied with the Japan army in the history. Yeah.
And how were the people who were mixed race treated? The Peranakan, the people who were half Chinese, half Malay, or were they treated like Chinese or like Malays, or did it depend on who it was?
Yes, because for Peranakan, it's quite different from the pure Chinese ethnics because they came to Malaysia earlier. They came to Malaya earlier, so most of them they quite pledge loyalty to the British army, British colonizers. So when Japan army came, they actually they do recruit some of the personnel or administrative staff to work in the local governments. They tend to employ Peranakan. but not the Chinese. Like in my documentary, it mentioned about the 731 units. Those they do the chemicals research. They do employ some Peranakan doctors in Singapore and Malaysia, but not the Chinese. Yeah.
Is that the reason why Lee Kuan Yew worked for the Japanese news agency, that he was treated as a Peranakan?
I guess that is one of the reasons. And because they have to make use of his bilingual, because he can read English and then he can translate it for the Japanese. Yeah.
Right. And how did you end up going to Taiwan? Because the film is very much about the Taiwanese and how they got tangled up in all this. What prompted your move? And then I'd like to know what your experiences were there.
Yeah. Actually, I was born and grew up in Malaysia all the way until secondary, and then I did my degree in Singapore. Later on, I go to Taiwan for film study, and there I start to develop myself as a filmmaker, and I start to make films. So for my growing experience, a lot of my secondary school students, they actually came and graduate from Taiwan. So they keep telling me like Taiwan is a country with a freedom of speech that we do not have in Malaysia. So throughout my life, I'm quite looking forward to the living in Taiwan. This is one of the reasons I'm now currently, I have been based in Taiwan for more than 20 years because my first documentary, Absent Without Leave, which I try to search who my grandfather is. He is one of the Malayan Communist Party members. And that film was actually banned in Malaysia until today. It's a banned film. Most of my documentaries have made is banned in Malaysia. So this made me have to find another base. And Taiwan just happened to be the place that I can base there and funding, but then I can go back to make content. So I have a mixed feeling when I found out about this part of history because I'm so looking forward to Taiwan. But then when I discover there's this dark side of history, I also have a lot of angry in me. Like I'm questioning, like because until this year is 18 years since the World War end, but Taiwan society not really dealing with this part of history, and this is why the film actually has to be 5 hours. In the beginning, the plan is like just 90 minutes, and then it extends to 2.5 hours, and then to the 5 hours because it need to deliver a strong punch. Like the first half is reveal all the dark history, how Taiwan was involved in the war and a strong base for Japan Empire. And then the second half, I did show the first half to, when I was done with the first half, I showed it to young Taiwanese. They were like really shocked when they watched this because most young Taiwanese, they don't know about this at all. So it's like a sudden blow for them to realize, oh, their grandparents, their ancestors may involve in the massacre in Southeast Asia. And that at that moment, I decided the film shouldn't stop there. I have to develop the second half to show them, okay, now we know about this part of dark history, how we can learn from it, how we can think about it. And this is why the film extends to 5 hours.
Yes. And how was it received in Taiwan when it was shown there?
Okay. I would say it's a difficult film for them because of the content, also because of the language. But young people, we do theater release in the Taiwan, and then a lot of young people do show up and attend. There is almost Q&A session, at least 1 hour Q&A session for every screening. Because I'm very precious. I'm very taking into consideration this is a very important process. After watching the film, and then we can try to dialogue. We can try to go through and digest this heavy emotional, and then we try to talk about it. But I do have some audience came up to me, and then like they will ask me like, why you, a Malaysian, come to our country and try to dig up our dark history? Mm-hmm. Who do you think you are? You can come and dig up the dark history. And this film also screened in Singapore during the Singapore Film Festival. And then I remember there's one Singaporean audience who is like, oh, I believe he has some very bad experience during the World War II. So after he's watching the film, and then he also questioned me like, you Taiwanese, please tell me exactly now how many Taiwanese were involved during the occupation in Singapore. You see, it's the same me and the same film. screened in Taiwan and Singapore, but sometimes they treat me like I'm a Malaysian. Sometimes they treat me as I'm a Taiwanese. And then when I go to, it was also screened in Japan and Malaysia. What I'm trying to say is, we are so influenced by the national narrative. So most of the time we are project the enemy identity on you. And this is what happened when I screened it in Singapore and Taiwan and Malaysia and Japan. But this is what I'm trying to break through. Is that possible to discuss this history through transnational, not so nationalism's narrative and not ethnic-centered narrative? Okay, is it possible that we can try to discuss about this history, how we interconnect to each other? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I find most impressive about the film is that you interview people from all these different ethnic communities, and you don't lay the blame on any one in particular. I mean, of course, you show the Japanese atrocities and how horribly they behaved, but there isn't. It's not finger pointing. I mean, it shows that everybody was tangled up in this terrible time. Now, you spoke of three ethnic groups in Southeast Asia and Malaysia, but as you know, in Taiwan, it's also a little complicated because the original Chinese population of Taiwan that's been there for many centuries have a slightly different outlook from the Chinese who came over with Chiang Kai-shek after the revolution. I wonder if you notice differences there too, because I've often found that the so-called native Taiwanese are rather nostalgic often for the Japanese period. Not always, sometimes that is false, but they are nostalgic because they react against the mainland Chinese who dominated them. And there is a reference to that in the film. And it also makes the Taiwanese different from the Koreans, I think, who were treated worse, I think, in many ways than the native Taiwanese. To what extent did these differences play a part in your interpretation of history?
Yeah, maybe I can brief a bit background, like because when we mean Taiwanese involved in the Japan army, which means the Taiwanese before 1942,
Yes.
those native Taiwanese, they came to Taiwan earlier.
Yeah.
So the number is like 20,000 of them, which means one in every 5 families, there is a male involved in the war. So there is a lot. So after 1945, Taiwan was taken over by KMT, Kuomintang, and then the mainlander Chinese came, and then they moved to Taiwan. But starting from 50 to 90s, we were under the White Terror's martial law ruling. And during this period of time, those who were educated in Japanese, or if you were found related to Japan army, you will be targeted by the governments. And this is why all those people, they came back from Southeast Asia, they try to hide their identity. They don't tell much about what they experience overseas. And only until after 90s, they can start to talk about it. And my experience of to interview those Taiwanese soldiers, the funny thing is, if you ask them the same question in different language, you will come with different answers. If you ask them in Japanese, it will bring back their memories when they were young, they were trained during the soldiers, and they will try to answer in a very brave way. But then if you ask them to in Taiwanese, they were more seeing themselves as a victim of KMT. And this is just now, Mr. Ian mentioning about this nostalgia feelings about Japan is because of comparing the KMT ruling and Japan ruling. So by comparing, they feel it's happier to be ruled under Japan. So they develop this nostalgia to the Japan ruling. So I have a lot of trouble when I try to interview those Japanese soldiers. Those appear in my film that deny the massacre and deny all the war criminals. So when I first approached them, in the beginning, they're willing to talk to me, but slowly they found out from my accents that I came from Southeast Asia. So they will stop talking to me. And then when I call them, they will say, oh, they are not uncomfortable, they are not healthy for the talk. So I realized I can't approach them in this way. So for example, in the films, there's one Taiwanese soldiers. I didn't do the interview. I actually get another girl who is a Japanese. She came to Taiwan for studies, and then she has a similar background, who has a great grandfathers who is soldiers. But she never met his great grandfathers. She's very curious with this part of history. So I just list out like the main questions, 3 questions to her, and then I leave the whole conversation to her. So she talked to this old Taiwanese soldier as if like this possibly her grandfather, great grandfather. And so this is why, like you're saying, I'm not trying to pinpoint, finger pointing anyone. We try to empathize. We have to empathize the situation, the social context they grow up, how they were educated. So in the films, when the Taiwanese soldiers try to deny all the war criminal and tell these young Japanese girls, say, oh, you shouldn't believe all this because it will break your confidence. Although the content itself is not politically correct, but the intention is he mean it, because he's trying to talk to his like granddaughters, like you shouldn't believe it. It will break your confidence. And it apply also to all the others Taiwanese soldiers. I asked their descendants to talk to them, so to promote this cross generation talk.
Yes, and I thought that worked particularly well with that rather moving Japanese guy who went back to Malaysia,
Yeah,
and the conversation he had with the young Japanese, and I thought that was very important because it shows how complicated this is in Japan itself. I mean, people always say the Japanese deny everything and swept everything under the rug. It's not that simple. There have
yeah,
always been Japanese who have been forthcoming.
yeah,
The other person I found very moving was the man in Malaysia whose grandfather had been executed as a war criminal.
yeah,
That was an extraordinary thing. And I hadn't realized how many Taiwanese were employed as interpreters, including for the Japanese secret security police, the Kempeitai. So they
yeah,
were clearly witnesses to a lot of torture and that kind of thing. That's probably less true of Koreans. I mean, it's often been said by former POWs that the Korean camp guards were even more brutal than the Japanese because they themselves were treated very brutally often by the Japanese. Do you think there was a big difference between the Koreans serving in the Japanese army and the Taiwanese?
Well, because I'm not clear about that, but according to the Japan Army policies, is like to the north, all the front line to the north, they will use the Korean soldiers, and all the front line to the south, from Taiwan onwards to the south, they will need Taiwanese soldiers, because Taiwanese soldiers they can speak Taiwanese language, which is very similar to Hokkien in Southeast Asia, and they already experimented when they take control of Hainan Island and some of the south part of China. This occupying Taiwan is actually make them more confident they can go south and to the Southeast Asia.
Right.
Yeah, I don't really have an exact number of how many interpreters, because they are not like fixed assigned to certain troop. It's mobile, like this. Sometimes they are following these troops, sometimes they go to other troops. But definitely there are a lot involved. And normally it's during the massacre, they have to count the name list. During the interrogate, then they will need those Taiwanese interpreter on the set. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you one thing about the film, a technical aspect of the film. Um, Much of it is very interesting archival material, and you use music in some ways, to dramatize it.
Yeah.
Then there are these amazing interviews. There are also reenactments
Yeah.
of what was his name, the awful general.
General Shi Zhenxing, I can't remember his English name.
Yeah, it escapes me now. But he was one of the worst generals in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Why did you decide you needed reenactments?
Okay. Actually, for my previous documentary, I avoid using reenactment because it will involve some imagination and dramatize. So, but from the beginning, I hope this film is approachable to all the publics. So I have to tell all the background in a very easy ways. understandable to everyone. So what made me confident? Because this general, although he involved the planning of the Great Eastern War, but he was never put on trial for that. He was not put on the war criminal on that. And after he go back to Japan, he actually continued his political career. And although in his mind is, although Japan lost the war, he is the genius who beat British Army. So he himself think he should be celebrated for that. So he did write 2 books, biographies. In the books, in a very detailed way, how he planned the war, how he come up with the plan, how he come up with the ideas. And I verified also what he was written in the book, and with some document from the Ministry of Defense of Japan, the plan was made in Taipei, which is unknown to Taiwanese. And this made me with enough information to read and add that things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, in fact, and didn't he after the war also work for the KMT Secret Service and the CIA, I believe?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Mm.
That is how he he escaped from the trial. Yeah.
And
From the
then
court.
ended up in Laos or somewhere and was never seen again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It
That's
was the first time I saw in your film that he'd become a monk. That I didn't know.
yeah, this is what I found. Some rumors saying he disguised as a monk and then he was gone in
I
the
see.
forest. Yeah.
Yeah, he was he probably exaggerated his role as a planner of the war, because the man who really beat the British in Malaya was Homma, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And but this guy, whose name still escapes me, was responsible for some of the worst massacres, I think.
Yeah. I guess this, if you look at all the recording, these 2 leaders, they dislike each other. There is kind of like competing, like they try to fight who is the main contributors to the winnings
Yeah.
of the Southeast Asia. Yeah.
Yes. Whereas Homma, I think, who was executed as a war criminal by the Americans,
Yeah.
was basically a real soldier, whereas this guy was a killer. It's my impression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, uh, one other question, and I think we conclude with that. There is a very interesting interview with the Japanese curator of the. Is it a museum specifically about the Holocaust in Hiroshima, or is it a war museum?
It basically is a museum of in memory of Holocaust of Jews by Nazis.
I
Uh,
see. Was your intention to press him a little bit and to make the Holocaust seem to compare the Holocaust to the massacres in Southeast Asia, or what was the intention of your interview with him?
okay. Because when I first learned about there is it's not just the only one in Japan. In fact, there's 3 to 4 this kind of museum in memory of Holocaust of Jewish people by Nazis. Uh, to me, it's quite ironic in a way because Japan army was involved in the massacre in Southeast Asia. If you want to learn from the war, you should learn from your own mistake instead of trying to put others' victims in other country context and to exhibit in that way. So this is my main purpose in the beginning, try to interview the museum's curators. But I didn't ambush him. I sent all the questions in advance to him. So I'm grateful to him to willing to accept the interview, and he speak up his mind this is how he thought. And I do believe when I asked him would that be possible you set up a segment to exhibit the Southeast Asia massacre, what would you expect from the people from the Hiroshima? He showed in a difficult situation. I do believe it can be a very difficult situation because especially children in Hiroshima, they have this very strong so-called peace education to believe themselves as the victims of atomic bombs.
Yeah.
They sacrifice for the peace of the whole world. This is what they were taught, and this is what they believe. It's even harder for them to think of themselves as a perpetrator.
Yes. No,
Uh,
and the other aspect, and we can perhaps conclude with that, but is that why your film is so important is that there are many Japanese who are aware, to the extent they're aware of anything, because most young Japanese know very little about World War II. But those who are aware of it know about something about the atrocities committed by the Japanese in China. It's the Southeast Asian side that is actually very unknown. I mean, there is what you show in Malaya and Singapore, but what they did in the Philippines is also relatively unknown,
Yeah,
or Indonesia. So
yeah.
I think it's extremely important for that reason alone, and I congratulate you once again on your fine.
Thank you a lot. Yeah. And like what you say, because people like who know the history, people like Professor Taka, they actually do a lot of effort trying to tell the young Taiwanese people, not sorry, the Japanese people. Me and my historical consultant actually ask ourselves, like, if there are people like Professor Taka keep doing all this effort trying to bring this history to the young generation in Japan, are there any Professor Taka in Taiwan? This is what I'm trying to ask.
Right.
Will there be a Professor Taka coming out? Yeah, this is, I hope in the future they will happen. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much for the conversation.
Thank you.